Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to my adventurous and probably a little bit ambitious attempt to clean, cull, and curate my entire card collection. So over the next few videos, we're going to be doing something a little bit different because I'm going to take you along as I attempt to basically go through, clean all of my shelves off, all of my deck storage, go through all my deck storage areas, and take a look at all of the decks in my collection and kind of start to cull out some of the ones that I'm not currently using anymore. And then at the end, with any luck, the goal is to actually show you my entire card collection of all my tarot and oracle decks that, of course, will be remaining after the culling that we're going to do midway through this whole series. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a different setup. I will be doing top-down views of my cards when we get to the collection portion of this adventure. But for right now, we're going to be doing it a little bit more vlog style, where I am just going to set the camera up around my office as I'm actually working through this entire process. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about why I'm even doing this. So prior to like 2017 or so, I had a total of, I think, 3 decks. And that was it. And then, and those were the decks that I used for many, many years, some of them over a decade. And I was perfectly content with that. And to be perfectly honest, I really didn't know that there was this whole other world of tarot deck collecting, nor that there was tarot decks that maybe would fall a little bit more in line with my personal views, how I read and how I see the world. And so when I discovered TarotTube, which is really what did it, that's what started me down the rabbit hole, was discovering that there were people on YouTube that were sharing their deck collections, and this whole new world opened up for me where I started to realize that there are decks for every purpose, for every intention, for every aesthetic, for every taste. And at first I was like, oh my goodness, I need them all, right? I have to experience them all. And so one of the reasons why I actually started collecting a bunch of decks was really for that initial being able to experience all these different decks, where for many, okay, let's be honest, decades, I had only had 3. And only one of them really was a deck that I felt really kind of reflected my own personal style a little bit. But none of them actually spoke to me like on a really deep or personal or soul level, like some of my decks that I have now do. And so while that's fun and that's fantastic, and to be perfectly honest, sometimes I don't have any idea whether a deck will work for me until I get it into my hands. That does also mean that I've accumulated quite the collection of decks. So I've done this culling thing before. It's not my first rodeo here. I culled a bunch of decks at the end of 2020 as well. And then earlier, I think it was in 2020, early part of 2020, I did a whole video about my struggles with trying to actually do this whole process. And so the first time didn't go so well. I really didn't cull much because I really wasn't sure what I was aiming for. What did I want? Why did I want to keep certain decks? Why was I willing to let certain decks go? And so the second time around, I was a little bit better about it because I had a little bit, I think, better understanding about what it was that I was looking for and what I wanted my deck collection to look like. Now, it is important to note that I'm not a professional tarot reader, so I don't read for other people outside of family and friends who beg me to, and it's not really my favorite thing to do because it's just not my forte. So all of the decks that are in my collection, they're for me. The decks that are in my household that are not mine and belong to my children, those are part of their collection. Whether I purchase them or not, I don't count them as part of my decks because I don't use them in my everyday practice. They do. So it is important to note that all of the decks that I have, they're just for me. And each one serves, for the most part, a purpose in my collection. Now, sometimes those purposes change, and sometimes, like anything I think in life, we go through seasons or kind of changes where things maybe appeal to us for a certain time period because it's something that we're currently dealing with or working through or learning more about. And so we find decks that connect with that and that help us to dive deeper into that, but it's not necessarily a forever thing. So I have a lot of decks in my collection that were really important at a time for me. They were really paramount to a particular season that I was in or a particular thing that I was studying or exploring at that time. But now I've moved on from that. And so there are some decks that really do need to just kind of find new homes because they are not being utilized in my collection. And I don't really have the space to just collect a bunch of decks just to collect them. I would love to have like a beautiful cabinet full of like, you know, beautiful, gorgeous antique decks and every deck of every flavor and every kind, but that's just not my reality. I am limited to the space that I have in this little 10 by 10 room. So it's important to me that the decks that I do keep and that I do have here at hand are decks that I am interested in working with and that serve a purpose for me in my collection. Now, I do want to make sure and note that at no point during this series am I ever meaning any disrespect to a deck or a creator or a publisher. I think that there are a million different tastes out there, and I am so glad that we all like different things because then that is what gives us this great variety of decks to choose from. So just because something doesn't resonate with me now or maybe just doesn't resonate with me anymore is no disrespect to anybody who loves that deck, who had any hand in its creation. I think that it is an amazing thing to be able to take a deck of cards and put it out into the world, right? That's putting a piece of yourself out there. And just like with my deck mods, they are never meant to be disrespectful. They do come from a place of love. And anybody who's modified a deck knows how much time that takes. So you gotta really like a deck or really want to work with a deck or connect with the deck to put the time and energy in that it takes to modify it. I feel kind of that way about this cull as well, because even though I may be saying this particular deck doesn't work for me anymore and I'm going to be moving it on, it is in no way meant as a disrespectful statement to the deck, the creator, or anybody who has any connection with that deck. So I'm just going to put that little caveat in there just to make sure that everybody knows that this is coming from a place of love and wanting to share my authentic experience with you all. And this is my experience. I'm overflowing. There's too many decks. I can't manage them all. I can't work with them all. And I don't want to see decks just sitting around on my shelf getting no love. Now I do have certain decks that I am holding on to that I don't use for either sentimental reasons or pseudo collector purposes, but those are very few and far between, and we will definitely take a look at those. So my initial thought, my initial idea, my intention with this whole series is to divide this process into kind of 3 different categories. Not only just for you in being able to hopefully cobble something together that is watchable, we shall see, but also for me just to be able to work my way through this process in a way that is sustainable for me. I've set aside a couple of different blocks of times that we're going to work on this, so you'll probably see my outfit change. I may or may not have my hair done, my makeup done. This is just me in real life. So we're going to be kind of exploring it through those 3 different categories. The first thing that we're going to do is kind of what I'm going to call cleaning, but I'm not literally going to sit here and clean my shelves because I don't know that anybody would really be interested in seeing that. But what we're going to do is kind of go through the different areas that I've accumulated my decks. Some of them do have like a logical structure, and I do have things that are sort of storage options that I will be continuing to put into place moving forward, or to keep in place moving forward. But we're going to take a look at kind of what I've got going on, where it's working for me and where it's not, because I think that's important as well. So that's going to kind of be in this cleaning section. Then we're going to move on to the culling, and I'm going to go through each and every deck, and I'm going to take a look at kind of a couple of different key points that I am looking at, kind of looking at these decks through this particular lens. I've come up with a couple of questions to ask myself, particularly when I'm like unsure about a deck. There are certain decks in my collection that I can just tell you like right off the bat. There's a couple of them that are on the shelf right behind the camera that are like, they're never leaving my collection. But we're going to talk about them anyway. And then finally, we're going to go through my final whole collection hopefully. We'll see if I can get this all together into one manageable, reasonable to watch series, because I think it's going to take a lot of editing and a lot of time and a lot of effort, but hopefully it'll totally be worth it in the end. So to start this whole thing off, we're gonna take a look at some of the different areas where I'm storing my decks, and we're gonna kind of give them a little clean. I don't even know where to start. I guess what we're gonna do is we're gonna start here with my sort of goddesses and what I call my full moon decks. So basically pretty much everything that is probably on this shelf is probably going to be staying in my collection because these are decks that I use quite frequently. But my thought is, for the sort of culling part, what we're going to do is actually create a bunch of piles. And I'm going to kind of group decks together so that I can kind of make a decision about if there are decks that I feel are really similar, because that's one of the criteria that I'm going to be using for my culling is, do I have decks in my collection that are really similar to that? And am I choosing to use one over the other more often? So we're gonna start here. We have, of course, all my Danielle Noel decks, which if you've watched some of my videos on it, you know I love those. They're probably not going anywhere. So we're gonna start with a collection of those. I did also have to go get some decks for my bedroom because I do have some decks that live in there. My dogs are hanging around right outside the door, so hopefully they will stay where they are. We have some oracles in boxes that I am still working with. And then, oh my goodness, this is my winter basket. I'm guessing that for the most part, what is in my seasonal baskets is probably pretty current, pretty accurate, because I tend to keep those a little bit more cleaned out. I tend to keep them a little bit more up to date because they are the baskets and the boxes that I get into quite frequently. But there may still be some stragglers in there. I know there's a couple of decks off the top of my head that I've been really thinking about moving on, just because I do have other things in my collection that are similar and I tend to use those more often, so we'll see. I do apologize if the lighting is horrendous, but because we are doing this kind of vlog style and I'm just winging it, I'm going with the horrible overhead can lights that just happen to be in my office. I do have the window open, so hopefully that will help, but no other lighting, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so now we have my basket of spring decks, which is heavier than my winter one, which is probably mostly because we are, at the time I'm filming this, it is February, and so I am in my winter decks, and so I've been more active in that basket, and so I've been kind of culling it out a little bit as I've been going, so it's a little bit more cleaned out. The other baskets, and when we get to the fall one, that one is overflowing. What is the name of this deck? Oh my goodness. It's this one. You guys know? Right? Tarot Transformation. That's what it is. Oh my goodness. So there's my winter and spring baskets, totally empty because they're all right here. There is no way I'm going to be able to fit like 300 decks on my desk, right? That's just not going to happen. Okay, so now we're on the other side of the room and we are going to be dealing with what is my dark moon / new moon, a kind of box of favorites, my summer decks, my fall decks, and what I call my overflow decks. And you know what? I still have 2 more boxes of decks down here, plus a bin for Lenormand, plus a box in the closet, plus decks on the shelves above my computer. I'm going to grab this one off the top because newest to my collection is the Weaver's Oracle. I mean, that's brand new, so it's definitely going to be a keep, right? But it goes in the Oracle pile. We're still going to go through them even when I know that I'm going to be keeping them. So the next one that we're going to pull out is all of my decks that I use for the dark moon / some of my kind of more tied into my personal or witchy or spiritual practice. So it's kind of a mishmash in here. Like my full moon deck basket was also like my angel decks and my Mary decks and things like that. This one has a little bit of everything in it as well. Alrighty, so back over here we have and these books are gonna fall as soon as I pull this out because they're like holding it up. We have my basket of like, if I put that there. These are sort of favorites or decks that I'm planning on working with this year. So they're kind of in this basket, just kind of in their own special place. We'll see what magic I can do in editing. Okay, so on this shelf, this shelf has, it's kind of a mess. We have my summer, my fall, and more fall, and more fall, and more fall, and more fall, because that's my favorite season, and I tend to collect decks that fall in line with that season. I'm gonna pull this one out because it's just hanging here out. This is the Hush Tarot. And then let's go ahead and grab my basket of summer decks. This is Tucker, and Tucker thinks he's helping. He's guarding the door, right? He's being my doorstop. So Tuckers make an excellent doorstop, just in case you were wondering. So let's put that one back. This big pile here, this is my two Claire Mack decks, the Faceted Garden Oracle and the Illuminated Earth Oracle. So we're gonna put those right there. We have the Earth Wisdom Oracle, the Tree Angel Oracle, the Plant Spirit Oracle. This whole process might be a hot mess. Tarot of the Trees, Tarot, whoo, got one. And the Tarot, the Wisdom of Trees Oracle. Oh my goodness. I'm not gonna have any space to actually put the basket down there. Okay, this. This is a thing. Oh, this is overflowing. This is all of my fall or autumn decks. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting tired and we're not even halfway through my collection yet. Wow, okay, so this is a lot, and this is just out of 7 baskets of decks that I have, and that doesn't include other bins, other boxes, decks that I have put away. That's a lot. We're gonna go with it, we're gonna go all in, and here we are. Right, Tucker? That's what we're gonna do. Tucker agrees. Okay, so this is what I did. I think that I've made a nice mess of my tarot decks. So let me just, hello, let me come down here and kind of just point out what I've done. I've created some kind of key piles, and some of these definitely need to get broken down into smaller piles because there are definitely some themes within these themes. On the far side over there, I have pretty much anything that's kind of earthy, pagan-y, fantasy type of decks. Over in this back pile, I have everything that's a little bit more modern. In this front pile, I have anything that's kind of cosmic or kind of crazy, kind of different. This pile here is kind of just nature and animal decks. Then we have my sort of old world / medieval decks. Can you see back here behind me? I need to move. Over here, I have kind of like my storybook, anything that's kind of fairy tale storybook-like, and then this pile here is anything that is kind of goddesses, divine feminine, or angels. And then over here, we have pretty much all my oracles. And I think that's it. That's my entire deck collection. Okay, all done. Whew, so that was a lot of work just to do the whole cleaning section and kind of organizing these piles and these decks so that I can kind of make some sense of what I'm looking at when I'm going to look through and cull them all. So I hope that you enjoyed going through this first bit of the process with me. I would love to know if you're doing something similar, if you have done something similar, how did it go for you? How did you approach your kind of cleaning, culling, decluttering, organizing, whatever you want to call it. So please feel free to share with me in the comments below. Thank you for joining me today. You'll find links for everything featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.